So here's the real deal. Amazon's not a slot machine. No e-commerce platform is a slot machine. It takes real work. It takes real knowledge building experience. It takes real capital to build. I've been selling on Amazon since 2019. I actually started selling on eBay way back in 1998 approximately. I gave up e-commerce for a while and there's a big gap there where I worked a different job. The idea is I came back to Amazon in 2019 and it's been 6 years as of this month that I formally launched my business, and we'll probably finish the year off at $5.3 million in revenue across all marketplaces, not just Amazon. We are growing really fast, but it's taken a tremendous amount of work. And I don't think it's actually going to get any easier as the business gets bigger. So here's the reality. You're going to need money to start and you're going to need money to fuel the growth. Now, if you checked out my last video, it really goes into how important capital is into a growing business. You're going to need to understand how the ecosystem works, the ecosystem of Amazon or whatever other marketplace you decide to sell on. And Amazon is the biggest, and I consider it probably the best marketplace at the moment to sell on. The most consumers go there, most consumers trust Amazon over all other marketplaces. So with capital, you're going to need money, but you're also going to need brain capital. You're going to need to understand how to use advertising on Amazon, which we'll get into in a future episode. You're going to need to know how to launch a product properly, how to market it and demo it and discount it properly to get effective sell-through. You're going to need to understand a lot of other like little jargony type things like conversion and optimization and all that stuff. You're going to really need to understand that to be successful, and that's not something you're going to learn overnight. It's going to be through both book learning, let's say, or online learning, through AI learning, but it's also going to be through real experience, and experience takes time and patience. Then let's get into the margins. You're going to need to understand your actual real net margins, because when people get into selling on Amazon, they hear the gurus talk about how they sold $100,000 last week or last month or $2 million last year. But if their margins are 4% net after all expenses, even if they sold $2 million last year, they only made $80,000 net. So when you hear about that, you're going to really need to understand the real net margins of the business. For instance, if you sell clothing and shoes, your return rate's about 40%, maybe 30 to 40%. So if you sell $1 million gross, you really, at the end of the day, your net revenue is 600,000 and the net profit's going to be even less. So you need to really understand the business. Clothing and shoes have high return rates, but they can be excellent businesses if you have massive margins, right? So if you're going to get into that business, make sure you have the 80% gross margins to cover return costs and the high touch nature of that business. However, if you're in a business like food, like I am, my actual return rate is let's say 0.5%, around there. The real return rate, right? Oftentimes, most of the returns are due to inaccurate addresses or missed deliveries. Those products actually, because they never were received by the consumer, go right back into sellable inventory by Amazon. But if you look at the net return rate, it's closer to 0.5%, which means when I sell $1 million, 0.5%. So my net revenue, not net profit on the year, what is that? 995,000. So it doesn't really get reduced by much. It's still $5,000 less than the top line reported, but it's really good to know the business, and the only way you really know is first do plenty of research before you even commit a dollar or an hour of your time to selling. The only way you really ever know is actually doing it. So do it. Get started, but really realize that this is going to be a grind. So some of the things that people it really actually derails them when they're launching their business and then they quit. And I think it's with anything, whether you're trying to lose weight or exercise to gain strength. If you allow setbacks to just derail you and stop your daily work on whatever the goal was, you're gonna fail. right? So in e-commerce, just like any other goal on selling on Amazon, any other goal, you're going to have a lot of setbacks, whether it's running afoul of Amazon's policy and procedure, new competition in the marketplace, the established competition in the marketplace. Everybody's going to fight you. Everybody's going to fight back, and you need to be prepared to battle. You're not if you are not prepared mentally to battle, to push through, to see through the next 5 years, the next 10 years for your business, then what is the point of getting started? So I don't really see a point to that if you're going to fold after 3 months, after 6 months. When you get into this, no, it is going to take time. Now, it's important to latch on to that incremental progress you're going to see over the first month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, year. I even 6 years in, we're crossing the 6 year mark of the establishment of the main company that we work with. I did start selling on Amazon a little bit before that, but officially through the way that I sell now, it was almost exactly 6 years ago. I still latch on to those incremental wins. When I launch a new product and the conversion rate goes up 50%, I'm like, my goodness. And even though it's a minor product in the portfolio, it's an incremental win and it gets me excited. It gets me excited about the future for that product, for the company, for my employees, for everybody, for my family, for everybody, even a small win. Because you need those small wins to push you to the big stuff. And I don't want to get all inspirational and motivational here, but you're going to have a lot of little wins, big wins, and little losses, and really big losses. Like, for instance, recently, Amazon took down 13 of my listings, which accounted for, let's say, I would say maybe 10% of my monthly revenue on Amazon. Took them all down. I could sit in the corner and cry about it, or I could cry about it to all the staff and my partners and all that stuff. But honestly, you know what? I have a system to work through that. I work through the system, and in a week, 7 of those 12 listings are back up and selling, and the other five, actually, one of the other five just got activated yesterday. So now I got four left, and I'm still working on it. So a big hit on Monday last week, and you know what? Just keep pushing through it, follow a process, use that Amazon support staff, and communicate with them and try to resolve your issues, right? Don't give up. Don't give up, especially if you have a track record of some success, incremental gains. So I want to talk about the mindset of selling on Amazon. And we're going to get into this. I think we're going to talk about these things once a week on this channel. Not mindset necessarily, but like, why Amazon becomes something that's really not an instant pool of riches, but a real place to build a long-term business. And we'll talk about the various aspects of how to make it a long-term business and how to grow it, and some of the strategies that I've used. But I think the right mindset is one, if you're launching products, what's your mindset? Is it just to launch products to just make money now? Because the way I look at it is Amazon's a great tool to launch a brand, to create real value. I think it's one of the better ways to launch a brand because you have an audience of hundreds of millions of US consumers with money, and their shipping network and their fulfillment network is amazing, honestly, despite some of the flaws. But it's amazing. So if you're trying to launch a brand, that means a long-term mindset because, if you could successfully launch a brand, depending on the scale, you're talking about wealth of $1 billion plus at some point. Nutrition bars. There's that influencer who built $1 billion brand in protein bars, and then you have the soda poppy. I'm not saying that they launched at Amazon, but they launched the brand and they built it, and it took time to build it. Poppy, I think, sold for hundreds of millions, if not, I think, over $1 billion. So, these are real brands that came out of nowhere. They were built by the founders, and then the founders exited or sold off a portion of the equity. Now, you may want to think about when you launch a brand on Amazon that you eventually can see the same thing in the future because that same thing can happen for you. So that is one thing long term. That's not a short term. That it goes into the fact or the beginning of the show where I said, hey, the gurus who are selling you passive income and you're gonna make this much right away, they're wrong. Like that's not really a great way to look at selling on Amazon. I don't think it's the right way. What the right way is come out with a product that people are gonna love, figure out how to market it properly on Amazon. And if that means hiring some people to help you, it means hiring, but you can learn a lot of this through trial and error, studying. There's plenty of books on product launch, courses, things like that. You're going to need to reinvest profits. You have to have that mindset that, okay, I'm going to enjoy some of the rewards of this business, but if I really want to build this business long term, I need to delay the gratification, reinvest profits. If you really want to really build real wealth, you're going to need to just be patient. The growth is going to happen steadily, and in fact, it's likely to happen pretty big on a big scale. If you think about that, you can grow 50 to 100% a year on Amazon and in e-commerce in general is pretty amazing. And you can do it year in and year out all the way up to a certain point if you have access to capital and you keep learning and keep applying and keep retaining those profits. So Amazon can change your life, but only if you approach it with the right mindset, with patience, and with the idea that you're going to work focused and hard on it to achieve what you want, your goal, which is a successful brand or a successful business.